This is Starting Point, a podcast that tracks Guyana's unprecedented growth from all vantage points. Join your hosts, Kiana Wilberg and Fariza Hanif, as they dive deep into the heart of topical issues.
Hi there. Welcome to this week's episode of Starting Point, the Oil and Gas Edition. I am your host, Kiana Wilberg. For more than a decade, ExxonMobil and its partners have made significant investments in Guyana's Stabroek Block offshore. Today, we will be gaining critical insights regarding fundamentals of those operations, as well as the role of Guyanese in all of this. To help us with today's discussion is a very important person. He is the President and General Manager of ExxonMobil Guyana Limited, Mr. Alistair Routledge. Mr. Routledge, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for taking the time to be here.
Thank you, Kiana. It's a pleasure to be with you and always exciting to be able to talk about our business here in Guyana, which is just wonderful. So much success, the partnership with the country, and just to see the change that's happening around us.
Great. So a lot to unpack because, as I noted, a decade worth of investments. And what I want to, well, more than a decade rather. And what I want to start with for the starting point of our discussion is to help our audience to understand the role of Guyanese. So help us understand some facts. How many Guyanese men and women are working offshore, and how much has ExxonMobil invested to date in training and employment?
I'd be happy to talk about that because growing our Guyanese workforce is one of our top priorities. I mean, we want at the end of the day the natural resource of the country to benefit as many Guyanese as possible, not just through the revenues it generates, but also through the people that gain employment or have business opportunities. So where better than to start with our growing workforce. Overall, about 70% of the oil and gas workforce in the country are Guyanese.
Okay.
When we look at the offshore workforce that you were asking about, there are around 1,800 Guyanese that are employed working offshore. Now, because of the rotational work program, people don't work out there all day, every day.
Okay.
They tend to work out there for a 4-week period, and then they go home and somebody else comes offshore for those 4 weeks. So at any point in time, there are around 900 Guyanese working offshore on the drill ships, the production facilities, the vessels that support them. So they play key roles across our operations.
Thank you for that.
Now, when it comes to training, you asked also about
Yes.
training. We have, since 2022, invested around 1.5 million hours of training. Everything from safety and health in our operations to leadership training across our Guyanese workforce. So, as you can tell, a significant investment and a topic that's truly of a passionate interest of mine. And you'll see also talk of the Guyana Technical Training Centre in Port Miranda's, to me, is really really an icon of what we're doing in the country and saying, look, we don't have the institutions today to meet the standards required for an oil and gas industry that operates to the highest international standards. But while we've been sending Guyanese overseas to train, we really want to embed that here. And so that was the vision that we developed with the government to build an institution in Port Miranda, in the country, that is now taking on board the 5th cohort of Guyanese to be trained for the offshore facilities. And these are highly technical professionals that are trained to be production operators, electrical, instrumentation, and process technicians. They all have historically had to go to Canada for a year to get training. This month, they started this 5th cohort training in Berbice. The first time that we'll be able to train the Guyanese, and indeed in an institution that can take trainees from overseas in the history of the country to meet our needs. So big thank you to Professor Clement Sankat for his leadership in not just creating a physical institution, but also the accreditation to the UK City and Guild standard that means that these are the highest level standards of education in this field that is also portable overseas.
Wow, so we're talking about a world-class institution right in Guyana.
Absolutely. Spot on.
Now, regarding the Stabroek Block, for most of the years since following the discovery in 2015, we've heard about the partners Exxon, Hess, and CNOOC. And Hess has been bought over by Chevron. And so there are two heavyweights, ExxonMobil as well as Chevron, operating in Guyana's backyard. How do you feel about this duo leading one of the largest developments offshore in the last decade?
Well, it speaks to the significance of what's happening in Guyana that Chevron was interested to acquire Hess. I mean, we work with Chevron all the way around the world, so we're quite used to having them as partners. Indeed, the teams have not changed very much, and at the end of the day, it really doesn't affect us in any significant way. ExxonMobil remains the operator here in Guyana, and so you won't be seeing any change, just the same performance going forward.
Now, regarding your projects, we have 4 in operation, and there are 2 that are top of mind for many Guyanese, and that's Waru and Whiptail. What updates can you give us about those 2?
Oh, delighted to do so, but I'd be remiss if I didn't just recognize the Yellowtail project. You mentioned 4 projects. Yellowtail started up just in August this year, and we've been going through all the commissioning and startup process very successfully. Again, record-setting performance for starting up 4 months ahead of the original funding basis and beating many projects around the world on that schedule. Getting to background flow, injecting gas within 30 days, starting to inject gas within 30 days. So just outstanding performance, and we really should celebrate that. But as you say, looking forward is something that we are constantly doing, and we're excited to do that. We anticipate the Waru project being able to start up by the end of 2026, and then the Whiptail project starting up by the end of 2027. Both projects are moving forward extremely well on all fronts. And that's from drilling wells, and our teams there are performing on the 5 rigs. We're ahead of, we're on all the benchmarking, industry leading for these deep water wells. On the subsea umbilicals, risers, flowline installation, the strategic investment that we made to support the development of Reed and Hoop Shore Base enabled us to have 3 subsea installation campaigns performed in parallel this year offshore Guyana, and really would not have been possible had we not made that investment, and been supported by the dedication of many Guyanese there. In fact, just a few weeks ago, we were at the Reed and Hoop Shore Base celebrating with the teams there the first subsea pipeline end termination that was assembled here in Guyana and has now been installed on the seabed. Oh. So yet more milestones for the country. But yes, looking at these projects, Waru and Whiptail, really moving forward. The FPSOs, the floating production, storage and offloading facilities, are both currently in Singapore, and that is where they are being fabricated, assembled, being prepared to journey over to Guyana.
Now, on the operational side still, there's a matter that I want to raise. It's been in the press, and I hope you'll indulge me. This is a matter that was raised by a civil society group called the Oil and Gas Governance Network. And the reports state, or indicate rather, that complaint was made to U.S. senators regarding concerns that American taxpayers may be funding the operations here in Guyana for ExxonMobil. What are the facts regarding this?
Yes, and you know, our critics do a great job of keeping us on our toes. So I do want to be absolutely clear. The first year in which we started paying, recording a book profit, an accounting profit in Guyana, was 2021. That at the time was Esso Exploration and Production Guyana Limited. Right. We renamed the company ExxonMobil Guyana Limited. So 2021, the first year we made a book profit. The first year that we started to garner tax credits here, or the ability to receive tax credits, was 2022. So the first year that we could have used tax credits in the U.S. in ExxonMobil's corporate filings would have been in 2023.
Okay.
We have not used any Guyana tax credits in our U.S. accounting in 2023 or 2024.
Is that by choice?
That is by choice. We have not exercised that choice to use any Guyana tax credits in our U.S. filings.
Okay. So the assumption or the complaint that any American taxpayers' dollars are funding the operations, that is not true? Or
It is certainly not true. All of the financing of the business here is coming from equity finance. That is, ExxonMobil, Hess, and CNOOC's own reserves of cash have been used to finance the business here. And so let's be clear, the difference between book accounting and cash flow. I mean, most businesses, I think all businesses are clear, cash is king. That is what is the fundamental of any operation, of any operating business, is how much cash are you investing, how much cash are you returning. Now, book accounting includes all sorts of other elements, such as amortizing capital investments that delay when some of those costs are recognized and therefore change the way that that is looked at. Cash is much simpler. How much money have we invested? How much money have we been able to take out of a business? In Guyana, ExxonMobil, to now, still remains in a net cumulatively negative cash position. In other words, the capital that we have invested in the country and the ongoing operating costs have been funded by ExxonMobil, Hess, and CNOOC. And although we have been receiving some profit oil, it is yet to, and cost oil, it is yet to fully pay back all those costs.
Because it's being reinvested.
Because we continue to invest in the country, and the investment that we had previously made was so significant that it takes time to build up enough of a revenue stream to pay it back.
Okay.
So, up to date, we remain around about $5 billion negative. In other words, on a cumulative basis, we've invested and spent that much more than we've received back between cost oil and profit oil.
Thanks for that.
I think that's clear. We remain, this is a hugely important business. It will be a very profitable business on a cash flow as well as on a book accounting basis. But cash is king. We are yet to get to the point where we break even on a cumulative cash basis.
Before we head over to the next important aspect of this discussion, I want you to talk about and I understand clearly what you've said about where the finances stand, but what strategic advantage does this approach give to ExxonMobil and ultimately ExxonMobil and its partners and ultimately the country? What strategic advantage this approach gives you?
When you ask about approach, you mean the investment approach here again?
Yes, the investment approach.
Well, there are different models as to how governments contract with international oil and gas companies in order to have them invest in the country. The model that was selected by the country, was what's called this production sharing agreement. And under this model, the government does not pre-invest in the business. The government only takes profit in the form of profit barrels and royalty. And royalty is paid straight off of the gross revenue that's generated.
Right.
So in this basis, it makes it very low risk for the government and for the country, never having to put forward cash in order to invest in the risk of a business that, remember, for decades, no oil or gas have been found in economic quantities until the Liza field was discovered in 2015. But then it took an enormous amount of capital, cumulatively to date in the projects, the seven projects that have been sanctioned. We've committed over $60 billion of investment to the country. This far exceeds the capacity in the country to invest in this kind of business. So it is a model that works extremely well for countries that don't want to can't afford to take the risk and also don't have the capital to invest in the business.
Understood.
And so that is what we're able to bring is that scale of our financial capacity, but also all the other capabilities, the technical capabilities, the operational capabilities, in order to help Guyana to find and develop its natural resource.
Thanks for that. Now, I want to turn to gas utilization, and particularly LNG. And this is another issue that has been in the news. Recently, I believe you held a press conference, an engagement with the press, and there were some insights which were provided on the aid project that ExxonMobil and its partners are eyeing, and that is the Longtail. And it was noted that the resources that would come from this project, and I want to just remind here, it was noted that the resources would yield greater benefits if used for power generation, data centers, or the conversion of bauxite to aluminum. And the Vice President recently noted that LNG still remains an option on the table. Provide some clarity where ExxonMobil and its partners are concerned. Was it ever removed from the table?
No, LNG has never been removed from the table. We keep our aperture open as far as gas development and how to maximize the value of the nation's gas resource until we can finalize what are the investment opportunities that do deliver that highest value, and we're able to secure contracts in order to execute those. But taking Longtail first of all, because this really talks to more than one project and as far as the gas resource is concerned. We are moving from, up until Project 7, what we would call black oil projects. Everyone is familiar with oil. You see pictures of it, images of it. It's a black substance. And so those first 7 projects are black oil development. So they're predominantly about recovering the liquids, although when we produce them, we do produce some gas. We use that for fuel, and then we re-inject the gas along with water to maximize the recovery of the liquids. Now, in Liza, we identified there was a small amount of gas that we could release to provide to the domestic market for power generation. That was the nexus of the gas to energy project. And of course, supremely important for the country to be able to generate fuel energy from its own resources, not having to import fuel oil. When we move to Longtail, now we're talking about a non-associated gas field, or a series of gas fields.
When you say non-associated, I'm sorry to cut you,
No,
but for the benefit for our audience, when you say non-associated gas field, can you clarify what that means?
What it means is the largest part of the resource in the reservoir is gas.
Gotcha.
And therefore is not deemed to be associated with liquids in the way that our black oil fields are. The predominant fluids that we will produce from the black oil fields is the oil. But we recycle the gas. We produce gas with it, recycle it.
Thank you.
No, I'm happy to explain that. When we get to non-associated gas, it isn't to say there aren't liquids that come with the gas, but gas is the predominant fluid to be produced. And so but then also I think a question in this area has been, we talk about condensate.
Yes.
What is the condensate? So gas, and then when we produce it, many of these non-associated gas fields, they produce liquids. Now the amount of liquids will vary, but generally those liquids that come in non-associated gas fields are much lighter petroleum liquids than black oil. And indeed, condensate is not black. It is a clear liquid. Almost in a sample bottle looks like water or alcohol, and it is indeed much closer to being an alcohol. It's those lighter ends of the petroleum products that looks clear, is related to, it is a hydrocarbon, but it is the much lighter end of the hydrocarbon mix.
And so before we move forward, just so that we're clear, regarding LNG, this is still an option that is on the table for discussion regarding Longtail and the monetization of Guyana's gas resources.
Yes, we've been through extensive studies on, well, first of all, exploring and appraising this southeast portion of the Stabroek Block to understand the resource that's there And these are complex reservoirs at different depths with slightly different mixes of the gas and the condensates. And so we really needed to understand that and how they may be developed in order to then determine, well, what sort of a gas market would they need or would they match with. Mm-hmm. As you know, as it stands today, Guyana doesn't really have a gas market. It has a market that uses cooking gas, mm-hmm. bottled LPGs, liquid petroleum gas, mm-hmm. but it doesn't have a methane market, a piped market or large industrial users as we stand today. Okay. So the options that were clearly on the table when you start to look at developing a larger volume of gas offshore in the southeast part of the block are to say, well, we could grow a domestic gas market or we could export the gas.
Okay.
Exporting gas could be through a pipeline if you were near enough, close enough to another gas market, mm-hmm. or LNG. And LNG is really just creating a virtual pipeline so that you export the gas to an established gas market somewhere else in the world. Mm-hmm. You literally liquefy the gas molecules down to about 1/600th of the volume that they would be otherwise, mm-hmm. and put them in special vessels that can take that liquid gas to other countries. Okay. But it's really just a form of export. So as we've looked at this with the government, we said, what is the highest value proposition for the country? And using the country's own energy resources, in this case gas, to support development of other industries, mm-hmm. whether it's more power generation, whether it's taking the nation's bauxite resources and converting it into alumina, mm-hmm. Or fertilizer for the agriculture sector. We've been looking at all these potential uses of the nation's gas resource. And when you look at the economic benefit, it's clear that by using the gas to stimulate domestic industries, it offers the country higher value. So that is why we've prioritized that as our area of focus. It isn't to say that we've taken export of gas, whether pipeline or LNG, off the table. Mm-hmm. It just means that we're moving our focus to where we think would deliver the highest value to the country.
Understood. Now, I want to get a few fundamentals on the 8 project that you have your eyes set on. Is it possible for us to get a ballpark on what this project is likely to cost?
Well, we're still working through the contracting so we can truly understand what those costs would be before we get to a final funding decision. Okay. But directionally, the vessel that we're talking about in scale will look very similar to a yellowtail or a whiptail type of floating production facilities on scale. Now, the top-size facilities will look different because this is a non-associated gas field rather than a black oil field. But overall scale is similar. We expect to have a similar number of wells to, say, a whiptail development. So order of magnitude similar to whiptail, which was around $12.5 billion US.
Thank you for that. Now, also on Longtail, it was noted that it will produce over 1 billion cubic feet of natural gas per day and around 250,000 barrels of condensate daily. And I know you explained in great detail what condensate is, but I want to know if you can just give us a bit more insight or color on how it is different from the other resources being produced. And when I say how different, in terms of market value, because you noted that it is on the lighter end of the spectrum as opposed to the black crude that we've been producing. So how would this look in terms of value on the market, and would it be the most premium oil that we'll be producing at that time?
You'd work very well in the marketing business. Indeed. I mean, because this is the lighter end of what exists in, if you like, petroleum crude oils, then it should attract a premium. That is part of the work that we're doing today as we look forward to a full funding decision on the project, is understanding how the condensates from the Longtail area fields will compete in the market. But we do anticipate that they'll attract a premium. Because at the end of the day, when you think of, you get into that black crude, and when you push crude through a refinery, then at the very heavier ends you get bitumen, what we lay on the road in order to finish roads. That comes from the very bottom cut of oil. It's the heavier, darker part. And then you come up and you have fuel oils, diesel, gasoline, and then you get up into jet fuels and the like. And if anybody has seen jet fuel in a bottle, it looks like a condensate. It's very light petroleum product.
So safe to say this will be the most premium oil that we will be producing once that comes up.
Indeed, Longtail will be a premium.
Wow, that's good to know. And for the benefit of our audience, can you give us some examples of what condensate is actually used for, just so that our audience gets an idea of some of the things that it can make?
Well, just as with the regular crudes that we're producing from the other reservoirs, it will be sold to refineries. Mm-hmm. What refineries do is they bring in different types of crudes, mm-hmm. and then they separate those out into those different cuts as I described, from mm-hmm. bitumen up. When you take a condensate and you put it through the refinery, you really take more of the premium products out of mm-hmm. that petroleum cut. So it'll be very similar. Go into refineries, it will be refined, but it will generate more of the higher end fuels and products from the condensate.
And my last question on this project, because I think it's really one of the exciting additions to the queue of 7, it's going to last 30 years. That's unlike the other projects that ExxonMobil has and its partners you have in your queue, which is about 20 years. Can you say, and I noted earlier that there's going to be condensate production first, then you have the gas. So how much gas will be produced over the lifetime or life cycle of this project, and when does that actually kick in?
Right. Well, production starts from day one of gas. Mm-hmm. I think what you're alluding to is the difference between production and what we re-inject in the reservoir yes. versus what we send to a market, whether, yes. as we talked about earlier on, whether that's an overseas market or indeed, hopefully, Guyana's domestic market as we grow that. But this, why 30 years? Well, it's a non-associated gas field. Mm-hmm. Gas fields typically take longer to produce the resource, particularly when they have these level of liquids, because you really want to recycle the gas as much as possible in order to lift out that condensate. Mm-hmm. You essentially dissolve the condensate into the drier gas as you cycle it back through. And as we all know, liquids are very valuable. We've just been talking about the premium yes. of the condensate from Longtail versus the black oil fields. And so we want to extract as much as possible to maximize the value of the resource that comes out of the Longtail reservoirs for the country. So it will likely be around 15 years that we're taking around about 1.2 billion cubic feet a day of gas. Now that's the same as all the first 4 projects are currently producing by way of gas. Okay. Think of those first 4 and the amount of gas they're producing. This will be equivalent to all of those as far as the gas is concerned. But we'll take all that gas, we'll use some for fuel, and then we'll re-inject that gas into the reservoir. And it has 2 benefits. Mm-hmm. The first one of those is to maintain the pressure in the reservoir. Rocks that are deep in the ground have a lot of pressure on them. If you extract the liquids out of the pores in the rock, they have the danger of getting compressed because of all the pressure from the rocks above them. So you want to retain that pressure in the pores of the rock just so they can retain their structure and in order to allow the fluids to flow through the rocks. Wow. Then the second part, as I mentioned, is just trying to sweep that gas through the reservoir and pick up as much of the condensate as we can economically produce to maximize that return for the country. So 2 reasons to inject the gas. Mm-hmm. From the beginning, though, we do anticipate that we will connect the Longtail field to other assets in the Stabroek block and indeed to the gas energy pipeline, mm-hmm. so that insofar as there is gas available and there is a gas market, then we can feed Longtail gas into that as well. But larger volumes of of taking that gas to market will probably be 15 years or so into the life of the operation. So quite some time in the future, and then we'll require years after that to produce that gas and the remaining condensate through the end of the field life. Hence the longer life of this operation.
Mr. Routledge, I know that our audience has learned quite a lot about the integrity, all that goes into maintaining the integrity of these operations, and of course the role of Guyanese and what they can look forward to in the next 15, 20 to 30 years in this industry. So thank you so much for taking the time to break down and share so many insights. I know that this is just the beginning of hopefully a very fruitful discussion that we will have in the year or two to come.
Thank you, Kiana. It's truly a pleasure to be here, to spend the time with you, to be able to share some of what's happening in our operations. I mean, at times, it's a cricket-loving country.
Yes.
And I have to say, it's such an honor to be a part of it. I mean, collectively, what's happening in the industry here, we keep talking about industry leading. It feels like the West Indies 1980s team, all beating around the world. It's truly a pleasure to be part of such a team.
Thanks again, Mr. Routledge. To our audience, thank you for joining us. We are hopeful that this has been an enriching discussion for you. Be sure to join us same time, same place next week as we bring you more insights regarding developments in Guyana's oil and gas industry. I'm Kiana Wilberg, and I'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching Starting Point. Follow us on Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn for critical updates and exclusive content.